Aw.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amy.
This is Audrea.
This is the Right Crowd. So grab a cup of coffee.
Or a cup of tea.
Maybe a little something on the rocks, which, by the way, I'm not sure Audrea doesn't have in her cup, just so we're all on the same page. And let's get started. So this week, we are wrapping up our discussion of Creating Character Arcs by K.M. Weiland. We are going over the frequently asked questions at the back, which, as Audrea pointed out in the last video, a lot of people tend to skip this part of a book. There's a lot of information back here, so don't skip this part 4 of this book. It's very informational. So, you want to start us off, Audrea?
Yes, I do. All right. I'm one of those people that probably would have skipped the FAQs, the frequently asked questions, but I read them because we were doing this video, and boy, am I glad I did, because a lot of the questions that I normally have about my books and the books that I read were answered in these FAQs. For example, one of them is, how can I figure out what my character's arc should be? Well, she answers that question in in chapter 21 in her FAQs. I like her quote at the beginning of chapter 21. She says, "You need to know the character as living, breathing. You need to know the characters as living, breathing people before you start the plot. Otherwise, you'll feel panic, anarchy, and chaos." For those of us who are pantsers, you're going to feel panic, anarchy, and chaos, but that's how you live. So, but still, choosing your character's arc is an important decision, and this book can help you do that.
Yep. And for the first question that you posed was, how can I figure out my character's arc should be? She gives you a book reference, but one of the lines that she says, which is kind of one of those it's tragedy, you die.
Oh yeah.
Comedy, you get hitched.
Yeah. And she asks you to answer a couple questions like, what's your genre? Where does your character's arc begin? Like, where does your story begin? Do they start in a happy place? Where are they going to end? That's going to help you come up with your what kind of arc they're going to have. And I highlighted big whole chunks of this next page because she said if they start in a comparatively happy place, it could either be a flat arc, or if they start in, if he's leaving the good place and if he's going to fight for it, it could be a disillusionment arc, or it could be a corruption arc. So this whole question was a great question that could help you with framing up your book.
Yeah.
And the third question, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, that's what I was going to say is the third question, where does your character's arc end? She has just as much information for that as she did for where does it begin.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, go ahead.
Nope, that was it.
And she says, based on your answers to these 3 questions, you should be able to identify which arc you want your character to follow and start plotting it accordingly. Easy for me to say.
See, I am really beginning to wonder what is in Audrea's cup today.
I don't know what is happening on this video. This is the most bizarre video. Okay. Next.
The second question, can a character's arc be a subplot?
I love this question. OMG, I love this question.
And why do you love it?
Actually, I wish I could turn the camera I highlighted this whole page because I love it, because this is how most of my favorite books are written. Their arc is a subplot. It's like I don't care how much this character grows. Blow up something, for crying out loud. I want to see some action. Come on, let's do some stuff. I don't. So I really liked how she explained most of my favorite books fall into this category where their subplot, their arc may be a subplot. And then she explains that your character could have a very shallow arc, and it's workable. It's legit. She still says, even if your character's arc could be a subplot or it's a shallow arc, you should still develop every step of their arc along the way, just so it's fully fleshed out, even if it's not completely visible on the page or on the screen. And she gives an example, which is an excellent example of one of my favorite movies. It's Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, where it's Peter Quill. Peter Quill, he has a positive change arc, but it's so shallow. And so stereotypical. He goes from his ghost, his mother's death, and his truth, which is the only way to be complete is a complete and fulfilled person is to care what happens. I'm sorry, I'm getting that mixed up. That's the truth that he must eventually realize. He starts out only being out for himself, and he must eventually get to that truth. But it's kind of in the background of all of that action and pursuing the girl and being a stud and, you know, being a hero for the sake of, you know, the glamour and all of that stuff. And I love that example that she gives.
And one thing she points out is that if you decide to make your character's arc a subplot, she says, plan it just as thoroughly and specifically as you would if it were the main plot. So give it as much work as you would the main plot. Okay, next question. What is an impact character?
I'm sorry. Before we move on to the next question, there's another little bitty arc. It's called a tangential arc.
Yes. See, I didn't know how to pronounce it, so I wasn't going to try.
Tangential arc. And she describes this one as the true character arc as subplot variation. And this one made me go like, oh my goodness. This one was she uses the example of the Jurassic Park arc. She says the true character arc as subplot variation is the tangential arc, in which the character's arc is full and prominent, but is only obliquely related to the main plot. So her example is like in Jurassic Park, where I always forget these doctors' names. Dr. Grant doesn't really like kids. He doesn't, but by the end of the story, he saves the kids and he thinks they're important. And he's the kid's hero and savior. I was watching that movie and I was all about, the main plot, the dinosaurs and stuff. And at the end of the movie where he saves the kids, I'm like, oh, that's nice. That's sweet. But let's get back to the main story. But that was his character. It was a little bitty character arc that he went through, and it was warm, but it was tangential. And that's why I highlighted most of this question now, or chapter 22 in the FAQs. So if you like this kind of story, this is going to be a great reason for you to read this whole section.
Yeah. She points out that this part can stand on its own. If it's done well, it can stand on its own and be its own adventure.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Anything else?
Nope.
Okay.
This is my favorite part of the book.
So the next one, she talks about impact characters.
Oh, yeah.
And she said it's a term coined by Dramatica authors Melanie Ann Phillips and Chris Huntley to describe what is just as accurately termed by editor Roz Morris, the catalyst character. So it's the character who slams into your protagonist, catapults him into the change, and then it has a major impact on his life. But it's not the main character. It's just a character that impacts your main character to do the thing he's going to do.
I found that whole section, or that FAQ session question fascinating. And I loved her example of Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars as an impact character. Because at first I was having a hard time with impact characters, because I get sub characters, and I get accessory characters, and that kind of thing. But impact characters, I was still having a little bit of difficulty with, until we got to the examples of like your Obi-Wan, and the character that dies in the arms of the main character, and the character rises up, and then so that kind of thing. So it was fascinating. What did you think about impact characters?
I had never thought of them, but she gives you a list of some of the examples. Mm-hmm. Another example was Raymond in Rain Man.
Yeah.
I hadn't even thought about that. But yes, he was, because he wasn't the main character in Rain Man. And it wasn't until I read that I was like, oh my gosh, that's right. He wasn't the main character, but he affected the main character. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she also points out that these impact characters are flat arc characters. They're not the ones changing. It's the people around them that are changing, or the circumstances around them.
Yeah, which is cool. It's such a really awesome way to think of them. Just when you remember what she said all about flat arc characters, about their truth is constant, and then they change the world around them. So you think of these impact characters with a flat arc, and then it was pretty cool to think of them that way.
I like the quote before the next chapter, the next question. And Stephen King is the one who said it. And he said, only enemies speak the truth. Friends and lovers lie endlessly caught in the web of duty.
Wow, that's deep. Leave it to Miss.
Which is kind of sad, if you think about it. Because shouldn't your friends and loved ones be the ones who tell you the truth? Obviously in love, but
I think we might be on the brink of a different conversation.
Where our next video is going to be a self-help video.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, I like that quote. I think that's a good quote.
A really good quote, and it's in service to the chapter, or that question, which is, should all my minor characters have arcs? Which some of the best writing books that I've read have said that all of your minor characters should believe that they are the protagonists. They should feel like they're the stars of the show, and they should be written like that. And they should appear on the page like that. They should have their own stories and their own arcs. And it's kind of how she answers the question. But you don't put all of it on the page. You don't dump all of it on the page. But they should have little minor arcs.
And the reason you don't put it all on the page, she says, this is what she says.
What does she say?
Bats. She says, you'll go bats. Seriously.
Yeah.
It's overkill.
Yeah.
Those are all her words. So you need to know what that character is doing. You need to know things about that character. And you might hint at some of those things on the page. But me as the reader, I don't need to know all of those things about a minor character. You need to, because you're writing the story. You need to know where the character came from, where he's going, like all that stuff. But to put it all on the page, you'll drive yourself crazy.
Yeah. And she also, one of the other, can too many character arcs be too much of a good thing? So yeah, so that's so just like you said, you'll go bats. Yep. I also highlighted in the next section of this same question, minor arcs for minor characters. That said, every prominent minor character should have an arc, just not a full arc, is what she says. And then she also quotes Michael Haig, who writes writing screenplays that sell. I think I have that. Is there an arc to each primary character story? In other words, that's one of the things, that's one of the checklist items that he has in his book. In other words, do your antagonist, sidekick, and love interest all possess clear outer motivations or goals, and all those desires built up and resolved by the end? So they should, and you should write those if you haven't already.
And she goes into more explanation. She says, in short, minor arcs require nothing more than the basic framework of any good story. This is not to say all of your minor character arcs must be this sparse, but as you're running through your checklist of story must-haves, at least make sure all prominent minor characters have individual goals, which are met with obstacles and conflict, which are eventually resolved one way or the other by the story's end. She says that all minor character goals must be prominent to the plot. So make sure it all goes together.
Right. And in the next section, she also talks about, she figures you're asking the next question, which is, which of your minor characters should have complete arcs? And she gives you some hints as to how to tell. She says, how can you tell which minor characters deserve more than just a dinky minor arc? And she said it all comes down to theme. A protagonist out there alone on a desert island will be able to discover a theme just fine, but all by his lonesome. But if your story allows you to supply him with a couple of key minor characters, you can put them to work in helping you build a more coherent and resonant theme.
And then she gives you some tactics to do that.
Exactly.
And it goes with all the different arcs that she's already talked about in the book. But she tells you how they should be and how to make sure that they all work together. One thing that she does point out when she's talking about the impact character's arc is that she says very often the antagonist himself will function as the impact character.
Yes.
Like, I hadn't thought about that, but it is. The antagonist is most of the times the impact character.
The person who's causing the most change in the antagonist. Yeah. Very interesting. See, this is why you should not skip the FAQ.
And what's funny is I usually also skip the introduction. I don't anymore.
You're welcome, people.
The next question is, how can I use rewards and punishments to change my characters? And she goes through and explains all these different ways. Points out that people are motivated by pain and pleasure. And to make it really work, the character must feel the change. He must be motivated to change.
This was an interesting one for me. I had never thought about rewards and punishment, but I had never thought of it like that. But then I thought about those try fail cycles, and those you see very clearly in movies and in books. But when you think of them as reward punishment cycles, you can clearly see them. I mean, even when you're watching old Looney Tune cartoons with the Wile E. Coyote, you can see try fail or reward punishments.
It's always try fail with him.
Yeah, he's punished a lot, actually.
Roadrunner always wins. Always.
All right. So
the next question, I didn't highlight anything in, So I'm going to let you say anything you have to say about it. But the next question is, what if my story has no character arc?
All right, I did highlight something in this section. So she says that if your character has no, can you write a story with no character arc? It is possible. She gives a really good example of that. She says that very often it's, sometimes it's a situation, and a situation can be developed into a very good story, well, very good, entertaining movie, or even a book. And the example she gives is the Great Escape. In the Great Escape, there is no character arc. It stars Steve McQueen, there's James Garner, but there's no character arc in there. They have a situation. They have to get out of, I think it's a prison camp that they're trying to escape from. I've seen that movie and I just can't remember what they're trying to escape from. But that's a situation. There's no character arc there. So she says a character arc equals a story. No character arc equals a situation. And what I highlighted is a situation is a problem or predicament with an obvious and direct solution. That's what a situation is. A situation does not reveal character. It tests problem-solving skills, and a situation has no subplots, twists, or complications. A situation begins and ends in the same emotional space. And when I read that, I was like, you know what? I've read lots of situations and I've enjoyed a lot of them. Very often, like Doctor Who is mostly situations. Serial fiction often is situations until the very end. Sometimes there's, character growth, but often it's, there's no growth. And then I had a, what do you call it? A epiphany when her example for this one was Raiders of the Lost Ark. He has no, ironically, in Raiders of the Lost Ark, there's no character arc. He does not grow. His character does not change. That is a situation. So whatever lie may be present in his life won't be challenged by the events of the story. So those are the things that I highlighted. And I highlighted and bookmarked this section of the book because I realized I like reading a lot of these types of stories, the Indiana Jones types of stories and so forth. And I even highlighted the end of this one where she asked the question, should you write a story with no character arc? And she said, it's not a black and white. The answer is not black and white. Situations entertain us, stories entertain us, and teach us what it means to be human. So it depends on what you want to write.
Yeah. What are you going for?
Yeah. And then the last question is, how do I write a character arc in a series? And when I first picked up this book, I flipped right to this question. Before I even read the whole book, and because this was what I was interested in, because I've always wanted to write a series because I love reading series fiction, and read this, and I love that she covered this in her book.
Yep. And she actually tells you how to do it, breaks it down, and then how to structure it, how to, like, if you're going to do a trilogy, if you're going to make it a 4-part, how to use the series to make your character, the depth of your character even more. It's good how she breaks it down. And then I told you she referenced a ton of books. She gives you all the books in one spot.
Yeah.
So you can go in and look and see what all the different books were. I've come to the end of my book. What about you?
I've come to the end of my book too. And just to go back to I really like how she gives bonus tips for those of us who are interested in the series. And you're not relegated to just covering a flat arc in a series. She gives you options, just like you mentioned. And she does give you a list of all the books that she covers in here. and so many great exercises. So you do not have to get the workbook along with the book, but you can if you want to not only work through the exercises she has, but also all the questions in even more depth are in the workbook that she provides. It's really nice when there's a sometimes when there's a nonfiction book, especially in the author craft book genre, they put out a workbook and they don't put a lot of thought into it. They just take some of the exercises from the book and it's just a repeat, which I can basically type those out myself. But I mean, it's handy sometimes, but there's not a lot of depth there. But there's obviously she put a lot more thought into these to give you more room to write and actually do more, like it's almost like a workshop in a book.
Yeah.
Nice when an author does that. So that's all I have for the Creating Character Arcs workbook. After reading this book, I think my writing my character arcs has changed a little bit. I have a better understanding of the types of arcs that I like to read and the types of arcs that I will write in my books. And I have a better understanding of the type of arc that I am going to explore more in my writing. So I did enjoy this book. And I actually enjoyed it because of developing that better understanding of the types of character arcs. Because I was always just banging, whenever I read these structure books, some of them, it seems like they're written mostly for like literature, and not all of them talk about the commercial fiction as much.
Right.
They're all 3-act structure and they don't get to the other types of books. And so it was nice that this one at least touched on the other types of fiction. So thank you to Ms. K.M. Weiland. So that was a great book. Glad we read that one. That's it.
So what's our next book?
Speaking of our next book, because you said, what's our next book? I have it here handy dandy. The 12-week year for authors, for writers. And
I'm super excited about the book. I read the 12-week year, and we've talked about Kanban boards and we've talked about HB 90, and it's all about breaking things down to quarters. And so this is one specifically geared towards writers. We have done, 3 or 4 craft books now in a row. Yeah. Our brains need a break.
Yes.
And so we've decided to use this one. And we are super excited to be bringing it to you in our next series. The next one after this video will be our bonus video on classes. So we'll discuss a bunch of different classes that we've taken or we want to take, and then we will kick off this book the week after. So be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Pick up your 12-week year for writers, and we will see you guys next time.